Hey guys, it's your girl Morgan, and today I wanted to talk a little bit more about avoidant personality disorder, kind of in the context of taking risks. So first off, let's just take a look at the WebMD, that's what it's called, right? Yeah. A list of avoidant personality disorder symptoms. So first off is avoids occupational activities that involve significant interpersonal contact because of fears of criticism, disapproval, or rejection. Is unwilling to get involved with people unless they are certain of being liked. Shows restraint within intimate relationships because of the fear of being shamed or ridiculed. Is preoccupied with being criticized or rejected in social situations. Is inhibited in new interpersonal situations because of feelings of inadequacy, views self as socially inept, personally unappealing, or inferior to others, and is unusually reluctant to take personal risk or to engage in any new activities because they may prove embarrassing. So, yeah, from the sounds of that, you can guess that people with avoidant personality disorder are not big risk takers. I used to have just this bubble that I wanted to stay in and keep everybody else out of. Fear of rejection, fear of criticism, especially being overly sensitive to criticism due to the disorder. It all just kind of makes the world appear to be this really dark and scary place. And so first let's talk about employment. So my first job was working as a cashier at a grocery store. And that grocery store is no longer there anymore. And I'm not really surprised because it was never very busy when I worked there. And it's right across the street from a cheaper grocery store. So I'm not exactly sure why people came to the grocery store I worked at in the first place. But, you know, it's whatever. It's their decision. I shouldn't be judging people based off their grocery store preference. So anyways, I was a cashier there, and as you can imagine, for someone with avoidant personality disorder, that is absolutely terrifying. I felt like I was constantly on stage, and having my performance judged by my managers, my older, more experienced coworkers, and most importantly and terrifyingly, the customers. Because honestly, customers are not always good, kind people. Customers can be rude and obnoxious, and if you have social anxiety, it can make your life really, really difficult. So I was 18 at the time, and this was after I knew I had anxiety, but before I knew how to communicate that I needed help for it. So I hadn't started therapy or anything yet for my anxiety. And so I basically felt like I was just thrown out to the wolves. I was completely miserable, and I only worked there for a summer just because I really couldn't handle the pressure of constantly being in that interpersonal social setting of having to interact with customers. And that is a lot of pressure to someone with avoidant personality disorder. To someone without mental illness, being disliked by someone may not seem like a big deal, because it's like, obviously not everyone in the world is going to like you. But to someone with mental illness, especially avoidant personality disorder and social anxiety, this can be especially damaging to your self-esteem. So every interaction, I would go back over and just analyze it over and over again in my head. And I couldn't stand going. And this particular risk actually wasn't my decision. My parents basically said, "You're 18, you need to be able to work now." And so I kind of was forced to unwillingly go along with this. And so after I quit, we finally, my parents finally came to the realization that I really needed help, because just having such an awful experience at a simple retail job, like, it wasn't even like a really rough retail job. It was just checking groceries, and I was miserable all the time because I was constantly anxious about work, thinking about what could possibly go wrong, and a lot can go wrong, as I learned. My cash register broke numerous times. The check reader started acting like it had totally forgotten how to read checks. And of course, you'll make mistakes. Just typing on the keyboard, and then you gotta go back and fix them. So this whole experience, it definitely impacted my future employment searching. So when next summer came around, and I had kind of just started therapy, just started doing CBT, my parents said, well, you can either get a job or you can take summer classes. And I was nowhere near ready to try and take on the responsibility of another job, so I chose to take summer classes. And of course, you can't avoid getting a job forever. Like, it's something pretty much everybody has to do at some point. And so the next summer came around, and I was finally seeing a psychiatrist and getting the medication that I needed so that I was able to take those risks. The way I see it is like, the risk is jumping from one cliff to another, and the medication kind of builds a bridge in between these two cliffs. So the risk doesn't seem nearly as dangerous. So I took a job at a dog daycare and boarding facility, and I loved it. I wasn't dealing with customers. The only people I had to deal with really were my coworkers, and Again, not every coworker liked me, but you know, you can't control those situations. You just gotta let other people do themselves sometimes, and a lot of the times the reasons they don't like other people are because they have their own issues with themselves. So obviously that risk was something I really needed the bridge to help me cross, because pretty much no matter what job you get, even if you're not working with customers, you're dealing with coworkers and managers, and it can still feel a bit like being on stage performing. And the fact that I felt like I was working and not performing just shows how well the medication worked for me. And so let's talk about the risk of relationships. So if y'all have watched my previous videos, you probably know that I have a girlfriend, and we've been together for 3 years now. So when she asked me out, it was just after I had started therapy with my very first therapist. And so I probably wasn't in a great place to be getting into a relationship mentally and emotionally. I had all these undiagnosed disorders that I was not managing very well. And if I could like go back, I would definitely like tell myself, well, for one, I tell myself to look up AvPD and to start training with DBT, and I would tell myself to get on medication so that I could have become a better girlfriend sooner. So obviously that's like a huge risk, because what if the person rejects you? What if you make a fool out of yourself? What if they criticize you? And at that point you have to kind of assess, you know, is the risk worth the possible reward? And I can tell you the reward of dating my girlfriend is very, very high. I mean, when you find the person you love, there are just like no words to even describe that. And so at the beginning, when she had asked me out, before I agreed to go on a date with her, I had to think about what if I'm rejected and I totally embarrass myself, versus what if she's the one for me and it is totally meant to be. So I looked at that and I thought about my past relationships that I had had with guys that had obviously they'd ended, and not necessarily in a great way either. I had a boyfriend when I was a sophomore and junior in high school, and basically after a year and a half he ended up dumping me to be with some other girl. So as you can imagine, that's a pretty big blow to somebody's self-esteem. So, of course, you're worried about that happening again to you. But at the same time, like, this idea of finding the one is almost, it's almost like a fantasy, is really the only way I can think to describe it. And this idea in our society is like so built up that you should be in a relationship, and I think it's maybe puts a little too much pressure on people to be in relationships. But, you know, I totally bought into it, and of course it ended up being nothing like I had expected, but everything that I needed. And so taking that risk, that first, yes, I will go on a date with you, was absolutely 100% worth it. So that raises the question, is it always worth it? Because not every single person you date is going to be, you know, the one. I'd had previous relationships, and if I went back and tried to say, you know, was it worth it? I think I learned some important things in each relationship. And so I think the risk was definitely worth it, even if it ended in rejection and embarrassment. So then the only question that remains is, how do you take the risk? How do you get past your fear of rejection? And this is particularly tough. There's a quote I like from the movie We Bought a Zoo. I can't remember what exactly it is word for word, but it talks about having 30 seconds of just insane courage that could completely change your life. And so I like to think I just have to be brave for 30 seconds, just long enough to accept a date, and then the rest should all just fall into place, and it did. And when you do suffer a breakup, you learn that it's not going to kill you. It may hurt, but you can survive it, you can push through it, and that with time it gets a lot better. And basically the lesson that life with social anxiety and avoidant personality disorder has taught me is, if you can't beat the fear, do it afraid. Do it absolutely and completely terrified out of your wits, which I was on my first date with my girlfriend. And then I realized, oh, she actually does kind of like me. And that fear kind of settled over time as we both came to love each other. And so basically you just have to feel the fear and do it anyways. It's learning to be able to just sit with your fear and not necessarily try to change it. And this is why I think DBT is so like essential to people with mental illness, is because you learn that not all emotions are pleasant, but you learn not necessarily how to change them and push them away the way you would in like cognitive behavioral therapy, but in dialectical behavior therapy, it's more about managing the emotions that you do feel and accepting them, and fear is going to be one of the emotions you're going to feel. So I think the fact that I am still here, I'm in a long-term relationship that's pretty serious with my girlfriend, is proof that yes, even you can take risks. Because with my level of debilitating anxiety, I didn't think it was possible I could survive some of these situations that I did. And, I did survive. And because of the risks I've taken, I'm at a really good point in my life right now. I'm actually at a point where I can look forward to the future instead of just looking at it with dread and fear. So I think I'm basically like living proof that taking risks is okay. Because yes, sometimes it'll fail, but it's necessary in life. So my advice to anyone else suffering from social anxiety and avoidant personality disorder out there is take that risk. Be afraid and still do it. Don't let fear stop you, because fear is just an extremely powerful feeling, and fear can stop you from doing just about anything if you let it. But if you take that leap across the cliff, and if you get help, like medication and therapy, you learn how to lessen that risk by building that bridge. And then there's less to fear, less risk of you falling to whatever's at the bottom. So be scared. It's okay to be scared, because you are a superhero, honestly. Like, to feel that much anxiety and to continue with your life anyways, you have like the strength of Superman. So be scared and do it anyways. Thank you for watching. If you like my video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you're not subscribed, I talk a lot about mental health issues, the main ones being social anxiety / avoidant personality disorder, borderline personality disorder, and bipolar disorder. And leave a comment if you've got anything to say or ask. I appreciate all your likes and comments. And so thank you for watching, and I will see you in the next video.